As our towns and cities become ever more gridlocked, there's a certain irony in the fact that road transport, once the single most serious threat to the future of rail travel, has now firmly put the train back on track. More than ever, people are using trains as an alternative mode of transport. And with the help of Europe's deep pocket, the railways are undergoing a complete overhaul. New locomotives, commuter trains, upgrading of track and stations are at last bringing rail travel in line with 21st century expectations, a vision that the founding fathers of the new Irish Republic could only have dreamed about. At the time of the establishment of the Irish Republic in 1948, Irish railways were in crisis. Despite the amalgamation into the expanded Great Southern and Western, and then after that in 1944 into the newly formed CIE, annual losses were spiralling out of control. A dramatic new approach was needed, and needed urgently. Todd Andrews, with all the fire of a successful man in his 50s and a reputation to match, went in and cleaned up the railways.
Andrews was that rare thing in the Ireland of the period. He was a professional manager. He'd worked with the ESB and latterly as the chief executive of Bode na Móna, which was one of the great success stories of post-war Ireland. And Andrews was brought in to try and sort out CIE, which was losing a lot of money, which in many respects its management lacked direction. And he made the railways and other parts of CIE take some fairly stiff medicine.
One of his first actions, as everybody knows, was the closing down of the Harcourt Street line, which is the Harcourt Street line from Bray to Shanganna, which is a line that at the time provided the built-up area between Dublin and Dundrum, and really from Dundrum to Shanganna there was countryside. No outcry about that closed down. Bit of nostalgia, but no outcry. Shortly afterwards, the Andrews board announced that they were closing down 3 railways in the south of Ireland. Waterford Tramore, West Cork Railway from Cork out to Bantry, and the West Clare Railway. Dr. Lucy, Bishop of Cork, preached sermons and delivered speeches on it. Delegations came up to Todd Andrews in Cork, questions in Dáil about whether he had properly received these delegations.
The story that added to the legend of Andrews was that he had met the delegation from West Cork, but took the steam out of their protest when he asked them how they'd travelled to Dublin. By motorcar was the reply. Andrews, acting as the new Broom, was determined to make his mark.
In the 1950s, the famous West Clare Narrow Gauge, famed by Percy French in his wonderful scatological ballad, Are You Right There, Michael, Are You Right? The West Clare was completely dieselised. New diesel rail cars were bought, diesel locomotives for the goods trains, new halts were opened. The line had a better service under CIE than it had ever had in its independent existence. So there was a serious attempt to give the Irish narrow gauge a future. But the line kept losing money and eventually it succumbed in 1961. One interesting thing is that in those early 60s, suburban services around Dublin suffered a remarkable loss of patronage as the middle classes who lived along the shores of Dublin Bay suddenly discovered cars and the roads weren't too busy and you could still drive to work in a reasonable time in the morning. So it seems inconceivable today that a station like Booterstown should be closed in the early 60s, but it was. And that, I suppose, is a reflection of the growing prosperity of the middle classes and the fact that cars were becoming available to more and more people.
The fact was that the railways were out of fashion and had outlived their economic viability in rural areas. The motorcar had become the favoured form of transport. In terms of the balance sheet, the closures saved CIE £2 million in Andrews' first year of operation.
The 60s for train buffs was a decade of sadness because it finally meant the end of our beloved steam locomotives, and the last ones ran on CIE about 1963. It also meant that railways began to, in some inarticulate and clumsy way, to try and reflect the style of the period. You suddenly had hostesses in unseemly short skirts appearing on some of the main trains. I always remember the black and white tiles which suddenly appeared at Amiens Street and Kingsbridge stations. And there was an attempt to become a little bit more fashionable.
By the mid-60s, heavily subsidised, the railways had become modernised and were infected with some of the flavour of the 60s. Customer care became the order of the day, in an effort to compete with cars and jet planes for holidays. Brighter rolling stock, rail hostesses, day excursions and magical mystery tours, radio trains and all kinds of everything.
Good morning everybody and welcome to the radio train to Killarney. Lord Conor Tracy here to welcome you aboard, to tell you something about our trip and the country through which we'll pass. We pass through verdant countryside, we see a country with 40 shades of green, and we arrive at Killarney where we meet the beautiful purple pools of Killarney's lakes and fells.
The 60s seemed to me to be in a very, very positive time, and the fact that they had hostesses was a positive indication, and that they used us for so many things. We were also trained, as I think I mentioned earlier, in public speaking, so that we could go out and address groups of people. And we did that in Ireland, but we also did it in Britain, and we talked to women's rural institutes and so on about Ireland and the pleasures of Ireland, and obviously, of course, CIE's part in making our holiday in Ireland a good one.
The single sort of abiding memory I have at that time is that the mystery train went from Amiens Street on a Sunday morning, and because my father worked in the station, he knew from Thursday what the destination of the mystery train was. So a trail of people would knock at our back door from Thursday to Sunday. "Mr. Sheridan, where's the mystery train going on Sunday?" My mother always said that we should actually charge for the information, you know, or that we should have a sign that we should hang up on the back door saying destination of mystery train. I mean, the hilarity for me of it was that the whole idea of a mystery train is you don't know where you're going. The predilection for people to want to know something that nobody else knows. So I can just imagine the discussions that went on in the queue for the tickets, you know, with all the Sheriff Street people saying, "Yeah, we're going to Arklow." Other people saying, "It's a mystery train."
In addition to mystery trains and radio trains, the railways, in an ongoing effort to keep up with the times, embarked on a nationwide advertising campaign.
Yippee! I'm free! The great train robbery's on again, and prices are being massacred! Yahoo!
During the 70s, the losses and the subsidies continued to mount. Two world oil crises led to increases in the price of diesel fuel and escalating running costs. And the Northern Travels saw the repeated bombing of the busy Dublin to Belfast line, with more expense.
70s were a difficult era, particularly on the cross-border line. The GNR main line, as was disrupted regularly. Trains were blown up, destroyed, structures were damaged. Though oddly enough, perhaps those doing the destruction, they didn't go the whole hog. They never attempted to blow up the Craigmore Viaduct near Newry, which would have effectively closed the line for a long period of time. Perhaps they wanted to cause disruption, but not total destruction.
Another expensively commissioned report from McKinsey Consultants said railways will continue to lose money and will always lose money.
The end result of the McKinsey report was to recommend total closure. But I mean, there was no way I was going to go along with that. I had too much of a feel for it. I had too much of an inside knowledge as to the huge service that they provided in rural Ireland and indeed in the city of Dublin and many other areas, and that it was investment they needed. And as well as that, at the time, there wasn't the huge amount of resources around that could improve the road network to take all this additional heavy traffic. And here we had an infrastructure that all we had to do was maintain it. And I was more inclined to the view of take more the heavy traffic off the road, get it onto the railways, and we wouldn't have to make the huge investment in the roads, nor did we have the resources to do it.
When you add up the real cost of motoring, you'll discover that mainline rail is miles cheaper.
The decision that had to be made was whether the railways would be sustained in areas where they were non-commercial, where frankly they would not make a profit, on social grounds, or whether they were to be ditched.
The fact is that we take the railways for granted. They seem always to have been there. We take the roads for granted too, and we pay road tax for their upkeep. But there is an attitude to the railways among all of us, which seems as if we expect to travel on them almost for free.
Part of the conundrum about railways, part of the problem to the present day, is that out of one half of our mouth, we want them to be commercially viable, right? Out of the other half of our mouth, we want them to be socially responsible. And we criticise CIE, or Eardon Road as it is now, bitterly for taking up substantial public subventions and so on. While at the same time, if a politician says, the only alternative is to close it down, oh no, never.
It was accepted by politicians on all sides of the political spectrum that there was an inherent social value in a railway system. Railways were per se a good thing, and that it was right for the taxpayer to pay some subsidy towards getting a railway system that was going to do a decent job for the country.
Investment was in short supply in the 1980s, when a burgeoning youth population and the growth of suburbs were straining the rolling stock to its limits. Without Europe and its deep purse at the time, the railways might well have collapsed.
That was a period when we had to find the money for DART. The decision had already been made to go ahead with DART, but no money provided. At the time I came in 1979. Carriages were falling apart on the main lines. The building of carriages had to be reactivated at Inchicore to build their own carriages. The CIE had plans at the time for electrification, incidentally, which have, come the full round since. But in general terms, I was a strong supporter of the railway infrastructure. I wanted to see it developed rather than closed. There was no way I would recommend to the government to close it.
Suddenly, from a very negative position, the railways went into, I would say, a very positive position. And now, during that period, we were able to get the investment for improving the infrastructure right throughout the country. We were able to get investment for new rail cars and for new locomotives, which we desperately needed a number of years ago.
A lot of people forecasted DART to be a total white elephant. If we hadn't got it today, I begin to wonder what sort of traffic we'd have to deal with in Dublin.
As the 8 o'clock Bray to Howth train pulled out of Daly Station in Bray this morning, CIE officials were describing DART as the most significant development in Irish railways this century. They had no doubts that the service would be a success with the public, despite its cost, £113 million and an estimated operating loss of £400,000 a week. For today, CIE's confidence appeared to be justified. At least 35,000 people used the limited service, an increase in passenger traffic of 50%. Because of that, 6 extra trains have been arranged for tomorrow morning. A spokesman said people were voting with their seats.
I was worried when they first came in that these wonderful new clean, bright trains would fall prey to the vandals. But the powers that be were absolutely rigorous in removing graffiti and replacing damaged seat covers almost the day that happened. And the trains have been kept in remarkably good condition ever since. They provide a regular and reliable and frequent service, and people need that for urban transport. They need to know that if they miss a train, another one will be along in 10 or 15 minutes. And the DART, with its name, with connotations of the American system at San Francisco, the Bay Area Rapid Transport, even the name, the DART, the speed, a wonderful piece of marketing, and not just that, a really wonderful service. If the DART was taken away tomorrow, can you imagine the chaos, the total gridlock which would befall Dublin?
I think it was the best probably transport investment this century, certainly as far as Dublin is concerned. And we found in our research that people with two-car families left the cars at home and took the DART into town. And certainly a number of years ago in the surveys we carried out, we estimated that we were taking about 9,000 cars off the roads in Dublin every day.
What will Ireland's transport needs be in the new millennium? And what decisions must be made now about the balance between road and rail? Those decisions will have to be very carefully considered, and the short-term cost of rail balanced against the long-term benefits, if we're to avoid becoming totally dominated by the motor car.
I think it's fair to say that over the last 10 years, driving a car has become a more and more pressurised business. And I'm not just talking about the urban areas, such as here as Dublin, which has been well publicised, but even if you're going to take a day trip to Cork or to Limerick or to Galway, it's something that's becoming less pleasurable, where if you travel by rail, it's more relaxing, it's environmentally friendly, it's certainly much safer. So a growing demand for use of the railway, but a great need for investment in the railway to enable us to provide the type of service that I think the people of Ireland deserve.
I hope that we're not going to go the way of just total road traffic. I think the way population is growing, the way Dublin is growing in particular, the type of lifestyle that has now been caused by the motor car. I think there are a lot of downsides to that lifestyle. I don't think anybody in their senses now, for instance, would have closed the Harcourt Street station if they could have foreseen what was happening, even though it made perfect economic sense at the time. But when I say we have to think constructively, socially about the role of the railway, that means thinking about what sort of society we want. You can't just talk about, let's look at the social role of the railway and say, okay, let's look at it. You have to say, all right, what is that social role? What type of society do we want into which the railway is going to fit and is going to play, is going to optimise its social role?
Luas, the new light rail system for Dublin, similar in its concept to this European model, is a rail-based modern urban tram system. It will provide a rail link from the outer city suburbs to the city centre. Integrated with the extensions to DART, Luas will provide Dublin with a rail system geared for the 21st century, serving a working and commuting population of 2 million.
The Luas is surely the next logical step from the DART. My only reservation about the Luas, oddly enough, is that it apparently is going to be built not to the Irish railway gauge of 5'3", but to the European standard gauge of 4'8½". And that means that if at any time there is need to run Luas trains on conventional railways or have some interchange between the two, that won't be possible. The Luas in some ways will right the great wrong of the 50s and restore the Harcourt Street line. And the great difficulty of the Harcourt Street line was that it ended in Harcourt Street, and its promoters, way back in the 1860s, had talked about extending the line to Stephen's Green, which effectively is as near as damn it to the heart of Dublin. And the Luas will go past the old station and round the Green, and that will achieve something which the promoters of the Harcourt Street line never managed to do in the 19th century.
Mainline rail will have massive investment, about £650 million to upgrade routes to the west, long neglected. Cruising speeds to Limerick, Waterford or Galway will be about 90 miles an hour. There now exists the possibility of opening new commuter routes, some of them along the very routes that were abandoned in the bleak 40s and 50s. The railways have fought back against the motor car. It took them half a century to reverse the trend. Now, all over Europe, rail travel is in vogue as cars snarl up approaches to cities and more roads, motorways and spaghetti junctions have to be built to accommodate them. And while it's accepted by planners that the motorcar is here to stay for the foreseeable future, rail transport is more and more being advanced as an alternative means of getting large amounts of people into the cities and out again in the shortest time and with the greatest safety. Safety, perhaps the single most significant concern amongst those charged with the responsibility for running the railways, is and always will be the most important issue, particularly so in the light of recent rail accidents.
The report of the independent consultants, and indeed we had 2 independent consultants commissioned by both ourselves and also by the Minister, made basically the same points. First of all, they said that the railway system that we operate is safe, that we have one of the safest records in Europe, but that we need investment, and we need it urgently. We knew that. We had our own consultants investigate the situation, and we're aware of the condition of the track. We have managed that old track for many years now without investment and kept it very, very safe. We've had no passenger fatality in a rail accident since 1983. I think since then there's something of the order of about 6,000 fatalities on the road.
The wheel has turned full circle in many respects. Once again, railways are seen as valuable, important. They're certainly very kind to the environment, and that aspect is more and more important as we live on a crowded planet with diminishing resources. Once again, politicians are proud and pleased to be seen at railway openings or introducing new trains or providing finance for new developments. In a word, railways have become sexy once again.
We must applaud those railway people of long ago who overcame the resistance of the local hoteliers and the posh lords and ladies of the land, and who decided that the people of this area needed a railway. I hope
the nationwide rail infrastructure, now under the control of Ian Rodaron, owes a great deal to those early pioneers who laid the first tracks out of Kingstown over 160 years ago. The railways are presently undergoing a transformation that will ensure that their vision continues into the next millennium.
The epic story of the Irish railways began here on this station more than a century and a half ago. Far-sighted pioneers like Dargan and Pym started something that was to have a profound effect on Irish life. But what about the next century and a half? Will we have the same vision? Will we invest in public transport, or will we continue to let the motorcar erode the quality of our lives? I believe these are some of the most important environmental questions facing us in the next millennium.
Come to the end of the line, folks, but the great train robbery doesn't end till March 16th, so get away while you can.
Train on a journey, train on a track, take me where I want to go.
And that was the final episode in the series Ironing the Land. Next week you can see the first in a new series, Wood from the Trees, a celebration of the beauty, the history and the diverse uses of wood through the ages. That's starting next Wednesday at 8:30 here on RTE1.
Railway sleeper, get no rest, ride the iron horse into the west, with a pick and a shovel to the mountain pass, the boys of the Barrow gang, with stone, steel and sand, ironing the land.
If you'd like to learn more about the history and relevance of the train system in Ireland, or indeed recapture the magic of this series, the book Ironing the Land is available from bookshops nationwide.